Hi everybody, my name is Joe Vitson. I'm a digital comic book inker, and today I'm going to go over a little bit on how I set up my pages to get started inking them in Manga Studio 5. You'll have to forgive me a little bit if I seem kind of nervous doing this. This is the first video I'm doing where I'm actually talking and giving instructions and going over exactly what I'm doing as I do it. So bear with me, and I'll try to do my best, and I'll try to get through this as smoothly as possible. If you do have questions, though, or on something that I don't cover, because this is just a quick overview of how I set up my page and not an in-depth exploration of Manga Studio 5, please feel free to ask me a question on YouTube. I'll get back to you as soon as I can, alright? So let's get started. So I have my Manga Studio 5 already open. I just switched over from Manga Studio 4EX to Manga Studio 5, and Manga Studio 5, for those who haven't used it or who are still, kind of begrudgingly not wanting to give up 4EX, it is a vast improvement over the 4EX version of Manga Studio. I think Smith Micro, who puts out the software, did a lot of work redesigning and pretty much making this a true kind of Photoshop light kind of software. So if you don't have the money to spend $600 or $700 on Photoshop, Manga Studio 5, the debut version is about, I think, $79, and then if you get the 5EX version, I think it's about $250 or $270. The only difference I've noticed so far in Manga Studio 5 and 5EX is 5EX is more geared to if you're creating your own comic books, and the way it helps you store your pages in order, so you have less confusion when it's time to put your book together. I don't do a lot of my own creation, so I don't really worry about that feature, so Manga Studio 5 debut works perfect for me. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to show you to do is we're going to go over here to the File tab, click on it, and we're going to click on New. That's going to bring up our dialog box for our new canvas. Now, Manga Studio comes with a lot of templates loaded, a lot of different sizes, but there wasn't really one specifically geared for American comics. So I went in and I made my own template. As you see, the page is 11 by 17. It has a resolution of 600 dpi. Manga Studio does these little draft settings, which kind of mimic the blue line that you'll see on Comic Book Board, but you do have to adjust the settings to make it set right. If you don't plan to print your artwork, you're going to just show it on the computer or digitally or whatever have you, you really don't need to worry about these. You could actually just turn them off, which is a click of a button. Okay? Alright. I'm going to set the page to, I don't need color, I'm going to set the page to gray for the pencil work that I'm going to be using. So we're going to say OK, and there you have it. You have your comic page. Alright. Now, in Photoshop, you would open up a new image and you would select all, copy, paste into your document. With Manga Studio, it's a little bit different. What you're going to do is you're going to import your image, and the image is already going to be imported into this file. So we're going to go to File, Import, Image, and then I have to go through the mess of my folders to find the piece I want to do, which is going to be a Joe Madeira Savage Wolverine page. I know I do a lot of them if anybody's watched other videos. It's just what I can do very quickly for these videos. I don't want these videos to be 6 hours long, because I doubt anybody would watch 6 hours of me inking. I can usually knock out a page by Joe in about 3 hours. So, alright, so this shows up. Excuse me, I also have a little bit of a cold. So, first thing you're going to do is you're going to resize. Now, since I'm not worried about printing, I can make this as big as I really want to. and get it all on the page without too many ill effects. So right there is pretty good. Now this picture is from the web, so it doesn't have the highest DPI value. One that usually use art that was scanned in at 600 DPI, and this is probably not even close to that. I'd be lucky if it's 150. But since a lot of people don't put high res images on the web for people to ink, you kind of have to take what you're given. And the only time it really affects you is when you zoom in, and I'll show you that. So over here you'll notice that Manga Studio already have some layers set up for us. We got our transparency layer, which is what we're going to ink on. So we're going to take that up and we're going to put that on top of the picture layer. Okay. So now we're going to have a transparency layer or picture layer and the white page fill layer. Okay, and the reason that you want to keep this is because if you don't have it and you do your inking on your inking layer and then you're done, well, you want clean inks. You don't want to send inks over the pencils and then have someone else try to clean it up for you. So you just get rid of it. But if you didn't have that white page fill, you'd be sending your colorist or whoever the page is going to go to next your inks on a transparent layer. And I'm imagining that's probably pretty tricky and difficult and more time consuming for a colorist or whoever is going to handle the ink work next to do their job. So you want to keep that fill layer because it's always going to give you a white background when you get rid of your art layer. Also, the lines that are on here from the guide, when you export the image out, these don't come with it. So you're actually just going to have a inked piece on a plain white sheet of paper. Okay. As you notice, you can probably maybe remake out. The artwork was taken from Quan Chang's website. He is the art rep for Joe Madeira. I've actually used a lot of artwork from there, and I've showed it to him and stuff like that. So I know that he doesn't have a problem with me inking Joe's stuff. Okay, so here we're going to change the name of this layer to inks. Okay, and the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to create another layer above it, which is also a transparent layer, that I'm going to change name white. Now, working digitally, there's a lot of different ways that you can make your corrections. You have an eraser, which is awesome. You have undo button, which is a miracle, a godsend, especially if you're a slow starter in the morning like me and you tend to make a lot more mistakes. But you can also use your pen tool or your brush tool with white ink, which is what you would do if you were working traditional inks. So that's pretty nice too, because then you can go in and do little effects and things like that. And once you got rid of the art layer, since the whole background's white, it would just look like it was a piece of the drawing that you did some kind of mad definition work on the piece. So that's cool. So I always have a white layer, and I tend to lock these just so I don't ever accidentally slip up and work on the wrong layer. Okay, so now for me, when I'm working digitally inks, this is way too dark for me. If I'm putting black over this, some of these lines are pretty close to black, some aren't, so it can get kind of confusing of what you're actually inking and the way things should go. So what I usually do is I'll take this down, the opacity of this layer to anywhere between 25 and 30 usually is good for Joe's work, because he does make it kind of dark because he knows that nobody's inking over his work. It usually goes straight to a colorist, so he does try to put a little effort into separating his blacks and things like that. So, but for me, I find this just a lot easier. It's a lot less confusing. Your lines pop off more, so it's easier for you to see, like, oh, I made a mistake, that line doesn't look right, or whatever. So I totally recommend that you definitely lower the layer down to about 25 to 30%. You'll have a lot easier time. And you see every time you click the artwork layer, your resizing box comes up. And that's if you need to make any changes. But once you start doing your inking, if you resize it, then you have to resize your inking, and that's probably going to add some pixelation to it. So I'm all set up here. So I'm going to go back to my inks layer. I'm going to actually lock that layer. So I'm going to go back to my inks layer. So this is the only layer that now I can work in, which is what I want. Because this is not a high-res image, like I said, there's a limit of how far you can really go in and zoom in before it starts to get really distorted or pixelated. So usually on these pieces, you can get into about 25 to 30% before it starts really getting bad. So that's 25%, and 30% still holds pretty good. You can still see some pixelation on the lines and stuff like that, but very workable. This doesn't add any confusion to the piece, so that's nice. So that's a good thing to keep in mind, though. If you start going into like the 50, 75, 100 range, it's going to be a mess. And I would never recommend working that close to the artwork, anyways, because you kind of start getting lost in details and making sure every line looks perfect and wonderful. And then when you actually see the product, the extra stuff that you might have added doesn't show up in print. And so you did a lot of work for nothing. And as an inker, the big thing that you're trying to do is you're trying to make money off of your artwork. So, like I said, I try to keep to about 25 or 33% if possible. Sometimes I may go into 50% if I feel that the detail I'm working on needs a little bit extra attention. But 25 to 33% is usually pretty good. Okay, so now the part of inking. What tools do I use when I'm inking? There's only a few tools I really use right now. I do have some custom brushes, but I know that you who are watching this video may not have those same custom brushes or brushes like them. So I'm actually going to just use the default pen that I think works best, even though they didn't include my favorite pen from Manga Studio 40X, which was the Maru pen. But they did give us a G pen, so that's what I use, a G pen. So I'm going to go over here, click on the pen icon. You can see all the custom brushes I have, and I'm going to go up here to the ones that were included, and I'm going to click on G pen. Alright, so come down here to the dialog box that's associated with the G pen, and you're going to see the brush size is 23. You can slide, you can increase with the arrows, or you can just come down here and just click on the size of the brush size in the brush dialog box. Depending on the piece and the resolution that you're working in, and also how far you zoom in, is what's going to affect the size of your brush. Now, a lot of people use a big brush, and then when they do their lines, it's just one kind of line, and it covers the width of the line that they're doing. I sometimes take the older Micron approach, because I used Microns for many years, to where you just do one line and then you do another line and then you do a fill with the bucket. Depends on what mood I'm in that day, but that's the one that I tend to use because I feel I get a little bit more control on my lines than pushing and dragging and trying to let off pressure to make my line come to a good point. Okay, so opacity 100, of course, because we want pure black. You have an anti-aliasing modes for your pens. For this particular pen, I like no anti-aliasing. So that makes my line as clean as possible, so that if I turn this piece over to a colorist, they're going to be able to block it in without a lot of the little gray pixels that float around that don't get picked up. And then the colorist has to go back and spend more time doing their basic fills. So I try to do no anti-aliasing when I do stuff. Stabilization. Now, if anybody has used Manga Studio 4 or 4EX, um, it was called something else. It was called correction. And the good thing about correction was it helped to take jitter from your hand. So if you're like me, who has a noticeable shake to your hand, it made your line smooth, and that was wonderful. Downfall to that was the higher the correction, the more that Manga Studio wanted to make your line straight. So if you were actually going to do a line, and we'll zoom in here just to do a little scratch line. If you were going to do a line like that, which you can do in Manga Studio 5, and Manga Studio 4X, it would come out like that. Or maybe a little bit more bowed like that. Because it was going to try to bring it as close to straight as possible. Now, that was good when you wanted to do really cool straight line effects, motion lines, etc. But when you're doing organic characters that have a lot of curves and bends and things like that, getting like a rainbow shape when you wanted a crisp point shape doesn't really work. So they got rid of that and they came up with a stabilizer. Excuse me. Now the stabilizer works with like correction. It gets rid of your jitters, the shakes, and things like that, and it doesn't alter the shape of your line though. It doesn't try to straighten out the shape, which is great. On slower, older computers, I know I have a laptop, older laptop that I have Manga Studio 5 on, and if I, like right now, I have it set to, I think it's 35 on here, because I do usually have a lot of shake. But that doesn't make your lines magical. You still have to be able to swipe your line and kind of hold your pencil or pen or whatever tool you're using in a steady fashion. You can't just go, oh hey, I'm out here, and then all of a sudden your line comes over here. It doesn't work that way. It just helps with shaking or trembling or tremors that you might have in your hand. Now, on my old laptop, if I set the stabilizer to 35, I'll actually notice a lot of drag. And the higher you go up with your stabilizer, the more drag I would notice. Now I'm running an i7 at home here and with my Cintiq, and so I can use 35 pretty easily without any noticeable lag to me. I'm actually probably going to take the stabilizer down though to 25 and go from there. So it's a good tool. Some people think it's cheating or whatever, but to me, it's like you're taking advantage of what the tools, the software offers you. Some people think using a ruler to make a straight line is cheating. You're going to do what's best for you in the artwork. So if you feel like you have tremors or trembles, or you shake a little bit because you're nervous, it's a big piece, deadline, whatever, it's a very useful tool. And it doesn't make your lines magical. You still got to follow the lines of the artist, and so to me, it's personal discretion when you come into inking. Okay, vector magnets is Manga Studio lets you work in vector, and it's really cool. It's a lot better to use for vectoring artwork than say Adobe Illustrator, but since I don't look at resizing a lot of my stuff, I don't really worry too much about vectors and vector lines or vector magnets. So that's the pen tool I'm going to use. Of course, you got your eraser. You got your fill bucket. And then what in Photoshop would be the pen tool, in Manga Studio, there's line tools, and the line tools are really cool. Can have anti-aliasing on, can have it off. You can change the size of it, of course, just by even clicking down here. The cool thing Let's see, this is a curved line. Let me do a straight line so I can show you. So you can do starting and ending points. So like if you do your thing, that's probably way too big to show you. You can bring your lines to points. And you can choose it by length, by percentage, by fade. Doesn't seem to be doing it for me now though, which is really bad. Now not to get it to do something that you want to do. Okay, well, alright. I'll have to tinker with that a little bit more. And let's see, by fade, what's by fade? It's not it, so, I don't use it much anyways, but I'll research it a little bit more and see if I can get it to work on the tutorial side of it. And see if I can get it to work and come to points. And that's all I really use. And in the line tools, straight line, curve line, polyline, rectangle, for the boxes and stuff. Lasso fill. You could do your fills that way if you want to. It depends what you're comfortable with. I usually just do an outline with the pen and then just use the bucket to fill. So that's basically what you're going to see me using when I start the inking tutorial. I'm going to take a little break now because I don't want these videos to get too incredibly long, and I do have a tendency to ramble at times. So I'll see you in a little bit for part 1 of inking this really cool Savage Wolverine page done by Joe Madeira. And hopefully you watching me, maybe you'll pick something up. I'll talk about inking. I'll talk a little bit about pros and cons of digital and traditional inking, and some other topics as I go along. I'll try to keep you entertained, at least by talking. It's a little bit difficult to talk and ink at the same time, but I'll see if I can pull it off, and hopefully we'll have a great time. So hopefully I'll see you back in a little bit for part 2 of inking a Savage Wolverine page.